Hi, in this video, I'll show you how to time yourself during an exam. I'll show you two main approaches that have really helped me during my career, whether it's a standardized test of 100 questions over 2 hours, or a test with just 3 or 4 questions, but they are long essays, or even a 30-minute job interview that has 6 or 7 questions, and I need to fit my 6 or 7 answers in the 30 minutes. The principles are the same, and they've served me well, so now I'm passing it on to you. Let's first frame the question. It is this: how do I allocate time during the exam so I don't run out of time at the end? The answer is allocate time by point, by the point values of the questions. Don't think of it as allocating time per question. In a standardized test where all questions are with the same point values, then it's okay. Allocating by points and by questions are equivalent. But in a test where some questions are worth more and others are worth less, it's not the same. And your job during a test is to accumulate points, not question. So if you're getting 80 points, then it's 80 points, no matter how many questions that means. Therefore, allocate time by points. A corollary of that is do not linger on any one question. The question is worth only so many points. It doesn't deserve more or less time than any other question with the same number of points, or several other questions that add to the same number of points. Do not linger. Spend the amount of time that question deserves, then move on. Here are the general principles. First, allocate time by point values, not just by number of questions. Second, mark time on the clock, such as 3:30 p.m. Not just number of minutes, like not just 45 minutes. In the middle of an exam, you may not remember what time the test started. If you mark down 45 minutes, you don't want to have to stress out over, wait, was it 45 minutes from 1 o'clock or from 1:10? And third, mark everything on paper, either on the test itself or on scratch paper if the test is online. Don't just try to hold the information in your head. You want to reserve brain power to do the test, not to remember time. I'll show two main approaches in this video. They are equivalent, but you may find one easier or harder depending on the math. I actually use them both, depending on the type of test, as you will see in this video. The two approaches are, number one, mark the clock time at 25%, 50%, 75%, and end of test. And number two is mark a clock time at certain customized point values in the test. I'll go through 5 different examples. First example is an exam with many questions, all different point values. This is typical of a school exam where there are several easy questions with low point values, maybe multiple choice or true false, and other questions with higher point values. Second example is an exam with many questions, all equal point values. This is typical of standardized testing or of an all multiple choice test. Third example is an exam with only a few questions, all different point values, and they're all high value questions. This is typical in a more advanced class like second or third year in college. Then I'll show you how to adjust your calculations if you want to reserve some time for safety cushion or for going over the test at the end. And finally, you may want to go for the easy questions first, answer them quickly, and that means you've saved some extra time, and I'll show you how you can reallocate time based on that. That's basically the outline of this video. Let's get started. Example 1. Exam has 10 questions, all different values, 100 points total, and is for 2 hours. Test starts at 1:05 p.m. And the different point values are shown on the screen. Question 1 is 10 points. Questions 2, 3, 4, 5 points each. Question 5, 10 points. Question 6, 20 points. Question 7, 10 points. Question 8, 15 points. Question 9 and 10, 10 points each. Now, if the exam is online and the questions are on the screen, you should write down the list of questions and their point values on scratch paper. That way we have something to write on. First, note the start and end time. Test starts at 1:05 p.m. plus 2 hours means it ends at 3:05 p.m. Mark the end time on the exam, 3:05 p.m. at the end there. Here's how we're going to pace ourselves. We will mark the 25%, 50%, 75%, and end times of the test and pace ourselves that way. But before I do that, let's step aside briefly and show you the math of what we're doing. Let's take a timeline of the test. The exam starts at 1:05 and ends at 3:05. They look like that on the timeline. To find the 50% mark, I look for the midpoint. The halfway point is the 50% mark. The idea is I want to complete half the point values in this half of the time. All right, we have the 50% mark. To get the 25% mark, I take half of 50%, meaning half of half. Now I know where the 25% mark is. I also know how long is 25% of the time and how many points are in 25% of the test. If I take that same amount of time and point values and add up from 50%, I'll get the 75% mark. Or I can take the same amount of time and point value going down from the end, I'll also get the 75% mark. Depending on the situation, sometimes you will find that it's easier to add up from 50%, other times it's easier to go down from the end. All right, so that's the timeline of the math. Let's get back to our example. It was 10 questions, 100 points, 2 hours. Half of 100 points is 50 points. Remember, we're allocating by points. And half of 2 hours is 1 hour. 1 hour after starting time is 2:05 p.m. Go back to the test questions and find the 50 points. Start adding from the beginning. 10 plus 5 makes 15, plus 5 makes 20, plus 5 makes 25, plus 10 makes 35, plus 20 makes 55. The 50-point value is near the end of question 6. Mark that and put the time of 2:05 p.m. right there. That means by 2:05 p.m., you need to be near finishing question 6. If you're pretty good at time, maybe this is all you need. Maybe you only need one time reminder. If that's you, then you can go ahead and skip through to the next example. But most of us aren't like that. I'd recommend continuing on and mark the 25% and 75% marks. Let's find the 25% point by taking half of 50%, half of half. So just go half of what we already computed. 50% of points was 50 points, so 25% of points is half of that, 25 points. In terms of time, 50% was 1 hour, so 25% of time is half of that, 30 minutes. Now we put it on the test. We find the 25 points from the beginning by adding. Question 1 is 10 points, plus 5 makes 15, plus 5 equals 20, plus another 5 equals 25 points. The 25-point mark is right here after question 4. And we need to get there after 30 minutes. 30 minutes from 1:05 is 1:35. Write that down. Now we want to find the 75% mark. We can either add 25 points from the 50% mark, or we can go back 25 points from the end. In this case, though, the 50% mark is inside of question 6. That makes it uncertain how we're going to add the 25 points. Instead, let's subtract 25 points from the end. From the end, question 10 is 10 points, plus question 9, 10 points equals 20 points. We need 5 more points, so that places us near the end of question 8. That's our 75% mark. And it should be 30 minutes before the end of 3:05, so that makes it 2:35. Write down 2:35 at that mark. This is our time chart. We want to pace ourselves according to these clock times. By 1:35, we need to have finished question 4. By 2:05, we need to be near the end of question 6. By 2:35, we need to be near the end of question 8. And we need to finish everything by 3:05. That means if you are behind, you may have to skip some question if necessary. Let's say it's now 2:05 and you're still in question 5. You're supposed to be near the end of question 6. Then you probably need to finish question 5 quickly, then skip question 6. You may say, wait, but question 6 is worth a lot of points. True, but you're behind by about 20 points. That means you have to let go of some 20 points. Now may be the time to cut your losses and choose which 20 points you'll let go. Either question 6, or questions 7 and 9, or 7 and 10, etc. That's the general idea. Get yourself on pace using the 25%, 50%, 75%, and end time marks, and stick to it, skipping questions if necessary. Let's move to the next example. Example 2. Exam has 20 questions, 5 points each, 100 points total, 90 minutes. Start time was at 11:45 p.m. This is typical of standardized testing where you have lots of questions. They're all equal values, and each question is worth a small number of points. There are 2 possible approaches to a test like this. One way is just like we did, mark the 25%, 50%, 75% and ending times, but I'll show you an alternative also, and that is to go by how many minutes per question. The reason why we can do per question in this case, because the questions are all the same value, so allocating by question is equivalent to allocating by point. Let's do the 25%, 50%, 75% and end times method again for this example. On scratch paper, write down the list of questions 1 through 20. Let's compute. Ending time is from 11:45 plus 90 minutes. 90 minutes is an hour and 30 minutes, so that's 12:45 plus 30 minutes, and we arrive at 1:15 p.m. That's the ending time. Write that down. Now let's find the 50% mark. Half of 20 questions is 10 questions. Half of 90 minutes is 45 minutes. 11:45 p.m. plus 45 minutes equals 12:30 p.m. Write that down, 12:30 at the end of question 10. Now the 25% and 75% mark. 25% is half of half, so 5 questions and 22.5 minutes. Let's round down to 22 minutes to be on the safe side. Go from the beginning at 11:45, then plus 22 minutes is 12:07. That's the 25% mark. Write that down. Start from the 50% mark, plus 22 minutes. That's 12:30 plus 22 minutes equals 12:52 p.m. for the 75% mark. Write that down as well. This is our pacing guide. By 12:07, we need to have finished question 5. We need to get through question 10 by 12:30, through question 15 by 12:52, and we need to complete the test by 1:15 p.m. This is the pacing. I need to stick to it. If I fall behind, I'll skip some questions. They're all worth 5 points each. There's no reason to linger on any question. Are we good? Let me now show you a different way of doing this. Another approach is to allocate how many minutes per question. Again, I want to remind you that we really want to allocate time by point values. But in this special case, because the questions are all the same value, allocating by question is equivalent to allocating by points. Exam has 20 questions, 5 points each, 100 points total, 90 minutes start at 11:45 a.m. We compute the number of minutes per question by taking number of minutes and divide it by the number of questions. 90 minutes divided by 20 questions equals 4.5 minutes per question. I want numbers to be round, so I double it to make 9 minutes per 2 questions. Here I go. I group questions in twos, 1, 2, then 3, 4, then 5, 6, etc., all the way to 19 and 20. Each group will get 9 minutes. Starting from 11:45, the first group needs to finish by 11:54. Next group needs to finish by 12:03. Next group by 12:12, and I keep going to the end. This is my pacing guide, very detailed pacing guide to keep you on track. Now, if you want some flexibility, you could do with less details. Back here, we used 9 minutes for every 2 questions, but we can also do 18 minutes for every 4 questions. We group questions in groups of 4. Count them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, 18, 19, 20. For every group, I give them 18 minutes. First group must get done by 12:03. That's 11:45 plus 18 minutes. Second group plus another 18 minutes, 12:21 p.m. Third group, 12:39 p.m. Next, 12:57 p.m. And last, 1:15. That's the end of the test. This is my pacing guide, a little more flexible, achieves the same goal. Let's do example 3. This is where the test has only a few questions, but they're all long and they have high point values. Something like this. This tends to happen more in advanced classes where you have just a few questions, but each of them is like 1 or 2 pages of essay, or a science question where you're expected to lay out a whole experiment with lots of diagrams and lots of math, or you have to analyze a business case study coming at it from multiple points of views or effects on various groups of stakeholders. Usually not short answers. 4 questions, 100 points total, 2 hours, start at 3:10 p.m. Question 1 is 15 points, question 2, 25 points, question 3, 25 points, question 4, 35 points. Since these are high value questions, they deserve their own custom time allocation and not just the generic 25%, 50%, etc. We do it by computing how many minutes per point, then multiply it by number of points for each specific questions. Let's compute. First, 2 hours equals 120 minutes. 120 minutes divided by 100 points equals 1.2 minutes. By the way, 1.2 minutes actually means 1 minute and 12 seconds, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know that. We'll just compute with decimals and round off if necessary. We know the 1.2 minutes per point. Let's look at the 4 questions and their point values. Question 1 has 15 points. 1.2 minutes per point times 15 points equals 18 minutes. Test starts at 3:10 p.m. plus 18 minutes equals 3:28 p.m. Write that down. We need to finish question 1 by 3:28 p.m. Question 2, 25 points. times 1.2 minutes equals 30 minutes. 3:28 p.m. plus 30 minutes equals 3:58 p.m. Write that down. Question 3 is also 25 minutes like question 2, so it's also 30 minutes. 3:58 p.m. plus 30 minutes gets me to 4:28 p.m. Write that down. Finally, question 4 at 35 points times 1.2 minutes equals 42 minutes. 4:28 p.m. plus 42 minutes gets me to 5:10 p.m. Write that down. By the way, I could also have gotten the 5:10 p.m. at the end by taking the start time of 3:10 p.m. and add 2 hours. Either way, this is my pacing guide. When the questions are high valued, you want to do it this way. All right, those are the two main methods. Either mark the 25%, 50%, 75% and end time, or mark the clock times at certain important point value marks in the test. Now, let's consider some adjustments. You can consider the previous 3 examples as like basic examples, and the next 2 examples are like more intermediate and advanced. First adjustment is maybe you want to reserve some extra time, either so you can go back over the test at the end, or maybe build in some cushion just for safety. For that, it's straightforward. Just subtract 5 or 10 minutes from the total time before allocating. Let's go back to example 2, but now we want 10 minutes for review or safety cushion. Exam has 20 questions, 5 points each, 100 points total, 90 minutes, start at 11:45 a.m. Just subtract 10 minutes from the total time. 90 minutes minus 10 equals 80 minutes, and proceed from there. 80 minutes divided by 20 questions equals 4 minutes per question. We have less time per question now. Remember last time it was 4.5 minutes per question. Now it's just 4 because we're setting aside 10 minutes. Again, group questions in groups of 2 or 4. I'll do it in 4. 4 minutes per question times 4 questions is 16 minutes per group. Starting at 11:45 and add 16 minutes each group. First, I have 12:01, then 12:17, then 12:33, then 12:49, finally 1:05 p.m. This is my new pacing guide. Note that the end is at 1:05, not 1:15 like before. Why? Because I wanted to reserve 10 minutes for review or for safety cushion, so pacing it to end at 1:05 is correct. Now, you may notice that in this pacing guide, as in all previous examples, the questions are done in order, starting with question 1 and then 2 and 3 to the end. But that's not always the best way to do an exam, right? So let's talk about this adjustment. What if you decide to answer all easy questions first? That is a legit way of doing exams, and in fact, that is a recommended way. You want to get the easy points first, especially if all questions are worth the same. Then how do I adjust the timing? Here's how. At first, you allocate time per question normally. You do the easy questions first, presumably because they are easy. Chances are you'll finish them fast and save some extra time. Then reallocate the rest of the time to the rest of the questions. Let's take example 2 again, but this time let's suppose questions 4, 10, 11, and 12 are easy and we want to do them first. Let's first allocate normally. 90 minutes, 20 questions, that means 4.5 minutes per question. We're doing the easy questions. We expect to spend 18 minutes on them because there are 4 of them. But suppose they're easy, so we get them done in 10 minutes. Here's a practical consideration. We're reallocating time here because we saved 8 minutes, which is a lot, almost equivalent to 2 questions. So it's worth spending time reallocating. If the saving was not a lot, it may not be worth the trouble. Maybe just keep the original allocation. But in this example, I'm reallocating the rest of the time to the rest of the questions. There are 16 minutes left and 80 minutes left. Allocate that. 80 minutes divided by 16 questions equals 5 minutes per question. That's our new pacing, 5 minutes per question. Or we can do 10 minutes every 2 questions or 20 minutes every 4 questions. Then we mark on the test accordingly. Let's say I choose to count by groups of 4 questions. The test started at 11:45, but I spent 10 minutes on the easy questions, so it's now 11:55. We start marking like this. 11:55 to start. The easy questions are crossed out. Count 4 questions in 20 minutes. We're at the end of question 5 and the time target is 12:15 p.m. Count the next 4. We're at question 9 and 12:35 p.m. Count the next 4 and skipping the question we already did, we are at question 16 at 12:55 p.m. Final 4 questions, we should finish the test at 1:15. This is our pacing guide for the rest of the questions after the reallocation. So here's a summary. Main principle is to allocate time by point values, not by number of questions. Except that if the questions are all equal values, then allocating by question is okay. Mark using clock times. Write the times down on the test itself, or if the test is online, then on scratch paper. There are 2 main approaches. First approach is to mark the end time, mark the 50%, which is half the time and half the point values. Then half of that, which gets us the 25% and 75%, both of the time and the point values. The second approach is to compute minutes per point and allocate by points. If the questions are all equal point values, then arrive at so many minutes for every group of n number of questions. But if the questions are not all equal point values, and especially if there are only a few of them, give each question its own customized time. Sometimes you want to adjust. If you want extra cushion time, then subtract 5 or 10 minutes from the total before allocating. If you want to do the easy questions first, and let's say you finish them fast, then reallocate the rest of the time to the rest of the questions. Still do it by points unless questions are all equal values. All right, hope that helps. Any questions or comments, put it in the comments section below. Like, share, and subscribe for more contents. And thanks for watching. Bye.